I'm pleased to introduce our two speakers today. First, we welcome Enpo from My Financial Coach. Enpo and the team of financial coaches he oversees, they work with over 400 medical families providing financial primary care. They are unbiased, personalized financial advice and planning company that guides clients to their ideal retirement and helping them choose the best, most efficient strategy to grow and protect their wealth. He has a Master of Science in Financial Services and many licenses and designations, like you can see on the screen there. He is a certified financial planner professional. He has several articles that are featured in the American Association of Physician Leadership Medical Journal, including one on how to hire a financial advisor. So hopefully he'll be talking a little bit about that today as well. And formerly, he was a planner for LearnVest, a financial representative for Bank of America, and a financial consultant for AXA Advisors. He is also joined by Melynda Rodgers. Welcome, Melynda. She has over 20 years of experience. In addition to her CFP certification, she has knowledge in various areas of wealth management and insurance solutions, as well as coaching families with loved ones with special needs. Melynda's true passion lies in developing comprehensive financial plans and guiding her clients through the process of implementation and ongoing monitoring. She leverages her extensive training in the art of discovery to uncover the aspirations that clients find truly meaningful. Philanthropy is one of Melynda's core values, and she devotes her free time to making an impact on the community. She's a member of Women's Giving Alliance, and she holds a board position with local nonprofit named Beam. With that, I will now turn it over to Enpo and Melynda for the presentations.
Thanks for having us. I wanted to thank the ladies for taking time out today because I realize how limited your time is. I know I can't even fathom how much work has gone behind what you guys are doing and how much it means that you took some time away to actually spend time with us to learn us. So we want to make this practical and relevant, not only as females, but also as female surgeons with a career that most likely for a lot of you is just now getting off the ground or just years into it. You devoted so much work into getting to where you are today. So we wanted to put a lot of meaning behind this. Not just talking about the numbers, but a lot of what we talk about. And when people ask me, what do I do for a living? It's behavioral finance. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today is behavioral finance. And not as so much as it's more so how your financial structure shapes your career, your options, and your flexibility over time versus, one of the biggest misconceptions we see is that career flexibility comes from negotiating the perfect job, when in reality, it comes more so from how your finances are structured behind the scenes. So what we've seen, particularly Empo can share this with you because he's been doing this for an incredibly long time, is that you can see two different medical professionals, surgeons. They could have similar incomes, similar, um, you know, trajectories, and yet, even though they have that, they've got completely different levels of financial freedom. So that's what we want to talk about today. One of the things I really was wanting to do is see if any of you ladies, because I want to make sure, like I said, that it's relevant. So if any of you ladies would like to throw something into the chat about what's top of mind for all of you, that would be helpful for us as well. And then when we get to the end of this presentation, you can make sure that we address that. So feel free to throw anything that is one of your top issues that you would like for us to think about today.
Let me first say that it's an honor being here. One of the things that I usually like to start with is how we're here instead of any other firm. It's actually because of our partnership with the ACS. So when we were brought in by ACS, they were really looking for a partner firm that would be able to help with the financial literacy and financial education, but not necessarily have any sort of additional motivations. And how we've managed to do that is by offering a membership fee based financial planning service. So we're not here to try to do assets under management or offer you financial products such as disability insurance, life insurance, or whatnot. Truly, every day, Melynda and I are committed to looking at the overall financial picture of highly compensated medical professionals. And because we only have CFPs and we are looking at this from a baseline cash flow perspective, we've started to notice very common trends. And a lot of this has really helped us with avoiding some of these common mistakes. So everything in these slides that we're about to show you are inspired by real life examples that we have had with our clients that are either just starting to build wealth or have started to really make that pivot into having more assets than they do liabilities. And we've come to realize as well that, even for the people here that have a financial advisor or they've already been doing their finances by themselves for a few years, what we've noticed is that usually people have a very clear bias towards the things that they find fascinating. So maybe you're reading the White Coat Investor, you're a boglehead, you're on the Vanguard website, you're kind of doing research into your favorite investment topics. But there may be some areas where you're maybe not as interested. You may not really know how to review your employment contract and see, hey, are my RVUs and bonus covered by my employer match? Or is it just my salary? Or, hey, maybe I'm 1099. What are the things that I'm missing out on that my W-2 friends all have? And so there are just some blind spots where even if you've been doing this for a while, we hope that the presentation today is going to be just as relevant for you as someone who's first year attending or still a resident. So I'm going to go ahead and pass this along to Melynda.
You spent years training, often living, I can only imagine, on a shoestring budget. And now you're finding yourself with some sort of sizable earning potential. The sky's the limit, right? But as the income increases, so are your expectations. Um, and what we've seen is you've had this longer lead time to getting into your career, and so you're looking at the other ladies within your age group. A lot of them have already graduated. They maybe have gotten married, they've purchased a home, started a family, and they're even starting to accumulate assets. And so now you guys find yourself in the position of you've got decisions that you're trying to make. Do I aggressively pay down my student loans? Now I've all of a sudden got this money coming in. Do I go buy all these things that I've been putting off buying for all this time? Buy the house? Do I save? So you're trying to weigh what are my highest priorities and how do I go about navigating this. So the biggest thing that we see is the pressure to catch up. So financially as well as lifestyle wise, and you're trying to catch up very quickly. So the combination is where we see a lot of the long-term financial mistakes happen. And that's what we want to talk about today. One of the most common challenges that we see is being intentional during the transition period. Um, and if you can be intentional during that period, it gives you a huge long-term advantage. Uh, and so let's talk about the first year attending split. And we see this. So we could give you plenty of examples of the positions we've worked with, but two different paths, right? We see, your first year out or you're a couple of years out, one person upgrades everything, right? They go out and buy the fancy car, the amazing house, and they're carrying the beautiful handbags. And then another one takes a more gradual approach and they're much more thoughtful with their spending. And what happens one of the things, because I have children, and so they'd had to hear me talk about finances their entire life. So I can say things to them like, what's the eighth wonder of the world? And they're going to all spew compounding. And so just taking that into consideration, You consider it versus the spending and getting a little bit more money shuttled in a different direction. 5 years later, the difference in your financial flexibility can be incredibly meaningful between the two paths, and it can a significant even with similar incomes. So even if one physician has the same income as the other, but your choices make a vast difference down the road. And so that's the most important thing we want you to take away from here is thinking through what you're doing now because you can't go back. So, um, the first 5 years, we'd love to know, and if you would like to throw it into the chat, be happy to do this. But who here? One thing interesting that Christina said when she first got on this call is, "I'm not working till I drop dead." I love that. So, who here plans to have a career that lasts at least 10 years? I'm thinking with the amount of time and effort you put into this, 10 years is right at least. But what about 20? And then when you start thinking about 40, we do have some people that are I actually went to the orthopedic surgeon Monday, and my orthopedic surgeon is I would swear he's in his 70s, and he's just now retiring. When I went to see him, he said, "I'm retiring finally." So, you can have a 40-year span, but who wants to have a 40-year span? And if I could see all your hands in the chat, I would be like, "Okay, so we don't wanna see that." So we speak to physicians in their 70s that are still working, not because they want to, although my orthopedic surgeon did tell me it was because he loves his work. And he did say that he's a little hesitant about retiring. But that's the anomaly. That's the unusual. Most of the time it's because they have to. And the reason being is they most likely didn't have it establish the habits early on that they could have taken throughout their entire career. And that's what we're trying to hit home. So the surgeon who couldn't step away, I worked with a surgeon who was incredibly burned out and felt completely stuck. He had a really high income, but minimal savings, no clear plan, and no financial buffer. So even though he wanted to cut back and walk away and explore even a different role, we see that quite a few people as they get older, they want to explore something different. They want a career change. But this, some of the surgeons we work with they don't have the option because their lifestyle is they're living in the lifestyle that they're used to living in, and now they have to continue to work to keep up with that particular lifestyle. So what happens is they don't feel like they can walk away when we compare that to someone with a solid financial foundation, they create options for themselves. So that's what we want you to think about as well is what options are you creating by these habits and these decisions that you're making. So that's what we're trying to build. The first 5 years, not necessarily about perfection, but the direction that you're taking. So this is what we do. Empo has definitely done a lot of this throughout his careers. Who here has read their contract? Who here has a contract, right? If anybody's brand new here, who here has a contract? Who here's read the contract? And then here's the biggest one. Who here understands their contract? So compensation in medicine, as Empo had hit on already, is incredibly complex, and we see it. I recently took on a physician. She's not even a surgeon, but even with her contract, she had 9 different types of compensation within that contract. She had salary, she had the productivity compensation, stipends, different types of bonuses. And one of the things Empo just mentioned is how you negotiate. That has a lifetime impact. And the other impact it has in some of the other things that you don't realize. Like I was working on a plan earlier today for a physician who has long-term disability insurance through his employer. He's not insurable for his own disability policy because and he's only 40 because of having type 1 diabetes. And so we're looking at what he can do because his disability through his employer is based on his base salary, and it's only 50% of his base salary. And because his employer pays it, it's taxable. So if something were to happen to him, he's young, he has 3 small children at home. We need to figure out what else we can do to make sure that he could replace that income if something happened, which we'll get to that in a moment. So let's talk about building. You don't need a complicated investment strategy for your retirement, but you do need to understand the tools that you got available. And that's one of the things that we see quite often is, do you understand the different types of accounts that you have and how to leverage them? This physician I was working on this morning, he has both the 403B, the 401A, and two different 457 plans available to him. And what he's doing is the double bucket approach. So you don't, so the type of employer that you choose affects the types of retirement plans that you have available to you and how much you can put into the retirement plans. So you might be in a traditional for-profit environment where you have access to a 401k and you can defer a certain amount into that 401k. Then you hit a certain age and you can defer more. And then you get a little bit older and you can defer more. They just created that a smaller window later on down the road in your 60s where you can even catch up more. But if you're in a nonprofit or academic environment or a government nonprofit type of environment, you have access to the double bucket approach, which means if you've got a delta between the amount of income you've got coming in and the amount of spending you got coming out, you can shuttle that money into both of those buckets. And we're prepared to talk about the taxation of those things, why you would want to do that. So if we get to the end and we have time and you guys have questions about that, we'd be happy to discuss that as well. But one of the things we also see is academic systems often offer more flexibility than people realize. So especially in the multiple retirement accounts, take advantage of what you can when you can. And if you, like I said, if you've got discretionary income, try to shuttle. This is one of the things I've been telling people for as long as I've been doing financial planning. Make maximum deferrals to your retirement plan when possible and minimally get the match. But with the type of income that you guys have, at some point you shouldn't be able to, I mean, you should be able to defer it and it shouldn't hurt too much. So be intentional and start early. Um, Building wealth early, that's it, if you can get it going early, you get the momentum starting early. So it's not about doing anything perfectly because we can't all do everything perfectly, but it's about putting a system in place that works consistently. So the earlier that system is in place, the easier everything becomes later. So like one of the things I've been telling people, years ago, I did a seminar called Smart Women Finish Rich. And we would pack the room. Women would come in and want to hear, what we do to get off the ground and finish rich. Of course, I mentioned that seminar to my 26-year-old daughter, and she said she hates the name. Understandable, I get it, but the concept is still just as viable today as it was when I originally started doing the seminar. And one of the things they talk about in that is paying yourself first. So we look at what would it be look like if you were to be able to shuttle as much into savings. And when it comes out pre-tax, it doesn't feel like it's 20% of your income because it's coming out before it even gets taxed. So you're actually reducing your taxable income at the same time getting money into savings. So paying yourself first before that money hits your pocket and doing it on a systematic basis. And one of the things I've taught people through the years too is dollar cost averaging. So if you've got money going into a retirement plan on a systematic basis, you're buying in into the investments and you're not market timing, but you're buying into the investments on different price points so that you are actually then smoothing out your investment basis so that you, over the long run, are, if you were to just take a lump sum, because I've had some people try to do this, say, I'm just going to wait for the end of the year and defer every bit of my money into my 401k. Well, if you do that and the market happens to be at this all-time high for the year, you just bought at the top of the market. Or if you might get lucky with timing and you might buy in at the bottom of the market. But if you're buying it, if you're just deferring out of your paycheck every month, it doesn't take your checking account. You don't see it, so you don't spend it. And then you're buying in at various prices throughout the entire year. And so you're not market timing. So one of the other things that we talk about quite a bit is your employer plans. They offer not just traditional deferrals into your retirement plan, but they also offer Roth deferrals. And so a lot of questions we get about, do I go the Roth side or do I go the traditional side? And we like to think that while you're early on in your career and your income isn't quite as exploded yet, then you might want to take advantage of deferring into the Roth portion of your retirement plan. At some point, your employer plan, it may not offer Roth, and you might be wanting to take advantage of a Roth, but your income's most likely going to be at the point where you're above the income threshold to even take advantage of the Roth 401k. Or so you want to, you don't have a Roth 401k, and you might want to take advantage of a Roth IRA, but your income is above the threshold. So one of the other things that we hit on is, what about doing a backdoor Roth IRA? And that's where you're going to make a contribution into a traditional IRA, and you're going to immediately convert that into the Roth IRA before there's any growth. And the whole purpose behind that is to prevent it from being a taxable conversion. So one of the things that's going to happen somewhere down the road, if you guys ever change employers, is you're going to have the option of porting your plan. So somebody's going to come to you and say, oh, you might want to roll over your 401k now that you move to a different employer. But what happens when you do that is, if you roll your plan to an IRA, you're going to preclude yourself from being able to take advantage of the lack of taxing in the Roth IRA. So when you do the conversion, if you have money in the IRA from a rollover, then when you go to convert, so you put some money into the IRA, you convert it to your Roth IRA, you're going to create a taxation. So these are just little subtle little things that a lot of people are not aware of, that we like to make sure that we share with our clients to prevent the mistakes down the road. So student loans, that is a big one. I would be interested to hear who here has finished school with a chunk of student loans. Last week I was working with a physician who just finished with 475,000 student loans. And she's trying to figure out what to do, because she's in an academic environment, except that no, she's in a nonprofit environment, which gives her the ability to take advantage of PSLF. And she now works at a subset within that environment that we're trying to determine, because it is a for-profit environment under a nonprofit environment. And so now we're muddying the waters here. We're trying to figure out, can we still go the PSLF route, or do we need to pivot, and do we need to think about, do we aggressively start paying down the loans? So I would love to hear who here is trying to decide their best strategy for paying down your loans. And then I'd like to make sure that y'all understand that there's no one size fits all when it comes to your loan strategy. So it depends upon your career trajectory, which MPO can attest to, especially if you're going to stay in a qualifying academic role. So 2 surgeons, 2 different loan paths. We've seen some with similar debt making distinctly different decisions, and there's no one size fits all. There's no one right answer for this. But if you're going to pursue PSLF, staying in the academic medicine intentionally and then getting maximizing of the forgiveness, or the other, you could be a first year attending, making maximum payments, and you're in a private role, but you're making an incredibly large income. So, if you were in a nonprofit role, so if you're making $400,000 a year and you're under IDR, and you've got to, make 10% of that $400,000 in a payment every year, that's $40,000 a year. So we try to weigh the pros and cons on each of these decisions and help with the guidance with that. So one might refinance early and transition into private practice, whereas another one might aggressively pay down those loans, or one might PSLF. All strategies work. It's just, this is the most important aspect. Make sure your strategy matches your career trajectory. The problem really comes into play is when those 2 things don't align. So be deliberate Make sure you are deliberate with your decisions. Try not to react emotionally with your strategy and just weigh the pros and cons. Keeping that in mind with your decisions, because the hardest part with some of this is some of it's not reversible. So once you refinance, it could be all bets are off and it's an irreversible decision. So we just try to make sure that you make the best decision on the front end so that you're not later on down the road regretting that decision. We do talk to people that are doing that. So we'd love to protect their earning power. And this to me is one of the ones I'm most passionate about is if something interrupts your ability to practice. And I have worked with physicians that have sufficiently insured for this, and I've seen it. I worked with a physician last year who's a neurosurgeon who had an injury with his hand, and he was out on disability from it. But at the same time, he also got diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's. So he's getting hit with a double whammy. He's not going back to work. And so wanting to make sure he protected his income. So we talk about if something does interrupt your ability to practice, everything else in your financial life becomes affected. So why a lot of physicians come to us and say, "Well, why do I need disability insurance? What's the big deal with that?" And the one thing I've told people through the years, physicians as well as anybody who I'm doing planning with, is the likelihood of you becoming disabled during your earning years is much greater than the likelihood of you losing your life. And so I would say your higher priority is to make sure that you have disability insurance in place. And when you're young, you start buying the policy. They give you things like a future increase option. And last year I was working with a physician who wasn't taking advantage of the future increase options. And what that is you buy a policy and every year they send you something in the mail that says, we're going to let you buy more. We're not going to make you go through the whole insurability process or go through a whole getting a new policy. We're going to let you buy up. And each year you have to take advantage of it. And if you haven't taken advantage of it after a couple of years, they no longer offer it. So taking advantage of that is huge. One of the other things that we see is paying attention to whether your policy is covering your occupation versus any occupation, because you have a very distinct skill within your occupation. And if something were to happen, you didn't make sure your policy was structured properly, then you might find yourself not being able to be in surgery, but you might be doing administrative paperwork, something that has to do with paperwork. Because if your policy says you can work in any occupation, then they're not going to pay out on your if you're disabled unless you have an own occupation that's definition within that policy. The other thing that we really like to see is we'd like to see partial and residual disability, because a lot of times you might be partially disabled or you might be able to go back to work on a part-time basis, or you might be residually disabled. But if you don't have that baked into your policy, then your disability, it hinges on you being fully disabled. And a lot of times it's not a full disability. And you're a surgeon, so you know what I'm talking about here. The last thing I mentioned earlier too is taxation of the benefit, and making sure that your benefit covers all of your income and not just part of your income. One thing I've read many times in policy that we see with group policies, it's a policy that you get from your employer, is they cap it. So even though it says it's going to give you 50% of your salary, maybe you're just your salary, they a lot of times they'll cap it at a certain monthly benefit, like $10,000 a month. Well, based on your income, that wouldn't come in anywhere close to what you guys would need to to replace that income. So those are all things we want to make sure you guys are looking out for. And something else too to think about is when you leave, if you decide to leave your employer, you can't take your group policy with you. And so I like to see particularly medical professionals have their own personal policy that's portable, something that goes with them wherever they go. And what's really neat is if you have your own policy and then you back into another environment where you're given a group policy, you can double up. So I had a physician that I worked with a handful of years ago who had multiple policies, including he owned his own practice. So he had business overhead expense. And so he was able, when he became disabled, he was able to pull in from multiple policies and more than supplement his income. So just the biggest takeaway here is done correctly. It's one of the most important decisions that you guys are going to make, and locking in insurability as well. So beyond the protection, there's a psychological component here to this too, is when you feel financially secure, you're going to make different career decisions. And so it's going to free you and tie you from feeling like you're pigeonholed into certain decisions that you may not necessarily want to make. So one of the bigger ones that we see is malpractice sale exposure. And I'd love to know who here knows what that is. And in telling you, it's the gap in liability coverage when a claim's made, insurance policy ends, and the legal window for a patient to sue is still open. And there's a great article I read on it the other day. I'd be happy to share it. But the gist is make sure you're going to purchase tail coverage so that you get an extension on your policy that's going to cover that, because it could be a big whammy for you. So biggest takeaway here is what gives you the ability to walk away from anything is financial security. Let's talk about. So really, that's really it. I want to make sure we have some time left over for you guys to ask any questions that you'd like to bring up to us. But these three things, keeping it as simple as possible. Keep in mind, it's a lot easier to increase your standard of living than it is to decrease it. So lifestyle inflation is real. Try to live like a doctor. Trying to live like a doctor too early in life in your career could wreak havoc. So let's try, and I read this one the other day and I love this. Try to stay off of the hedonic treadmill. And I just thought, well, I've seen that time and time again throughout my entire career with planning with people. So particularly could be important here because you all have incredible earning potential. And so try not to live like the doctor too early in your career and be cognizant about your spending. And I read this one too. I'm going to leave you with this. You spend more, but your happiness doesn't rise. It just resets your expectations.